Welcome to The Art of Discernment, a podcast where professors from across the Masters University discuss current events and higher education from a biblical worldview.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Art of Discernment. I am Dr. Bob Dixon, and joining me today is Dr. Whitney Gamble-Smith, the director of TMU's soon-to-be forthcoming interdisciplinary studies program. So Dr. Whitney Smith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get started, let me make sure our listeners know all your credentials here, because I got them right in front of me. You get a bachelor's degree in biblical studies from Geneva College in Pennsylvania, a master's degree in theological studies from Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary in Pittsburgh, and finally, a doctorate in systematic and historical theology from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. So you come highly decorated, and we're thrilled to have you.
Thanks so much.
So let's just get this out of the way up front. Tell our listeners, what is interdisciplinary studies as a major? What are we looking at here?
Sure. So as you mentioned, it's a new major, so we haven't offered it before. It's really exciting. So it's just in general, it's one of the most popular majors in the country right now. And what's cool about it is that it fits our mission and purpose at the Masters University in a really unique way. So just the structure of it is students can, in a sense, create their own major. So it will be a major that has 3 different blocks, and students can choose 2 areas of concentration, and then the third block is a mix of those 2 concentrations with a capstone and an internship. So the impetus of it is, well, it's been in the works for a while, and finally we're getting to see it off the ground. But the impetus of it is to train students to be creative thinkers, students that can look at the world and seek connections, see patterns. And then the great benefit of it is that it enables students to be great and attractive employees for employers, because they have multiple areas of specialization, multiple areas of skills, and are going to be trained to do many different things, which is great.
So traditionally, say a student would come to a university campus and say, I'm going to major in business. Mm-hmm. And using your term blocks, their block is business. That's all, that's, aside from the general ed requirements, they're going to take business courses. Mm-hmm. You say with interdisciplinary studies, the student can choose 2 or 3 blocks. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, so basically, if you want to study business, but maybe you also have interest in, for instance, music, you can actually study business and music, and it's not a double major. It's actually seeing how those 2 things relate and connect with each other. So you can choose anything. Right now we have 14 blocks, so kind of areas of study that you can choose from, and any of them can work together. And so let's say you want to do business and music. So you would take business classes, you would take music classes, and then the third section of your major would be exploring how the 2 relate and doing an internship, maybe in the music business industry. I think especially being here in LA, we have such an opportunity for internships. So part of that third block would be actually experiencing how the 2 different blocks that you've chosen actually work together. So
it is very much a student-directed approach to, I say, a college degree, but also pre-professional studies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I really like the idea of that, because a student who is interested, I'll use your example, music and business, traditionally you're stuck. They do not intermix traditionally. So a student has to kind of pick, and maybe you can do music with a minor business, and you try to, and it's up to you to try to figure out how they're connected. But it sounds like there's a lot of entrepreneurial components to this as well.
There is, definitely. And that's one thing that we want to be able to train and have a Masters University graduate be able to be an entrepreneur, not in just an entrepreneurial degree, but actually think like an entrepreneur. So yeah, and it is very much tailored to the student's own interest. And that's why there are required courses in each block, but then there's freedom within those courses to pick and choose and, emphasize a little bit more heavily on the business or on the music, and then integrate them together. So
I think it will be interesting to see what combinations students choose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have any guesses as to what you think might be popular, or is it just going to be really interesting to see what it will be?
I'm really excited. I think that's one amazing thing about this degree is that, there are so many different options. So I think business is an attractive major for a lot of students here at the university. So I envision probably a lot of business and something combinations. I think something like a history and theology would be amazing. Something like a political studies and history, science and kinesiology, biology, kinesiology. So it really is. And I mean, you could do something in, communications and history. So really the possibilities are not endless, but almost endless.
Yeah,
So,
it really is. It sounds attractive to me as a journalism professor. I think a student maybe could be interested in doing journalism and say science because they want to be a scientific a journalist in the field of science. Would make sense. Or maybe it's journalism and history. They want to be kind of political science or something like that. So it piqued my interest right away. One of the most popular or fastest growing majors in the country. This is the most popular major you've never heard of because it's brand new and yet really popular. What's the history of this field of study?
Yes, so it is new as a major, new-ish, probably within the last 20 years.
Okay.
I think there are studies even going back as far as 1997, so the mid-90s even, but as an actual major really started becoming more and more popular in the early 2000s. And now, as I mentioned, it is one of the most popular majors for students to choose. And I think with the world as it is right now, students understand, and certainly employers understand, that when you graduate, you're most likely, it's actually, the data shows 70% of graduates find jobs not in their area of study in college. So people are graduating, but then working in fields that actually aren't in what they actually got a degree in. And employers are realizing that. And employers are more and more wanting not so much a specific major, but specific skills. So an employee who can think critically, who can make connections, who can see problems and solve them, who can take data and come up with creative solutions to it. So the interdisciplinary studies major exactly prepares a student to be able to do that. Because, especially when you think the example you gave, journalism and science, those typically don't go together.
Correct.
And someone who can think through what it means to be a good journalist and a good writer and a good thinker, but then also someone who has skills and training in science, that's a dynamic combination that would be incredible to have that kind of skills leaving the university. So I think that's why it's becoming popular. It meets the needs of a world that is increasingly interdisciplinary. And what's cool about it is that you still become a specialist in these areas. So you're not just a generalist, and being a generalist isn't a bad thing either.
Right.
But it's, in essence, you're a specialist in multiple areas. So
for our listeners who maybe have sons or daughters that have a wide variety of interests or talents or skills, or students who might be listening for whom this sounds interesting, how would you describe a student who maybe would be successful in a field like this? What indicates for a prospective student that this might be a good choice for them?
Yeah. So I think if you have multiple areas of interest, if it's hard for you to think of, wow, I really just want to study blank, this is a great major for you. So thinking of myself, I had multiple areas of interest as an undergrad, and it was hard for me to choose a major. And I changed my major, I think twice, 3 times maybe. And it's very common for students nowadays to change their major. And I think that's because many students have multiple interests, and there isn't one major that kind of fits all their interests in areas of even skills and abilities. And certainly high school students today, they do sports, they do all of these different things. So a lot of high school grads have diverse interests. So I think this is an excellent major because what we're doing is we're taking all those diverse interests and talents and really harnessing them and saying, this is great. It's really good that you have these multiple areas that you're interested in. Let's help you think through them, see how they connect, see how they all work together, and then turn you out as this incredible creative thinker, entrepreneurial mind. So to me, it's a great, great thing.
That third block that you mentioned is to me, I think the magic dust over the whole thing. Like combining two fields of study, students have been able to do that, and it's difficult, but you can double major, major and minor. But what seems so intriguing to me is that third component that you just referenced again, that you're helping the student see the connections between the two. And some of that you mentioned were internships perhaps or mentorships. Talk a bit about that, because I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, so that third block is really, really exciting. So it would be a combination of courses from the two areas, and then it would also include it. So a capstone project. So a capstone project would look different for each student. And basically what it would be is some sort of creative project. And again, it depends on your areas of interest. So let's say you're doing history and theology. Most likely your capstone project is going to be some type of research paper that you're taking some ideas that are intriguing to you that you want to explore further, and you're writing up a research paper. If it's business and music, you're writing up a business proposal that relates to your interest in music. And so you're taking what you've learned for the previous year, year and a half, and you're working with an advisor very closely who's helping you think really carefully about how to be a good researcher, how to be a good thinker, how to integrate those two areas. And then you're producing something at the end as kind of a culmination of your study. So that's the capstone. And that's something you'll be able to use, on your resume, and you can show to a potential employer. It'll be a summation basically of all of the things that you've learned. And then in addition to that, you have an internship. And that again will look different for each student, which is great. And there's tons of options that we have, again, being so close to LA. Basically any industry that you could possibly imagine is available here. And we at Masters University have connections with companies, with, musical production, basically anything that you would want to be interested in, we can get internships for you. And again, that would be something that would help teach real skills. You can put it on your resume, and it would be, again, like a summation of everything that you've learned.
I just love that it's a program of study that recognizes the diversity that any university would see from their students. That we have, X number of majors, and typically it's, you got to fit yourself into those majors. But this one is more of an acknowledgement that we have those, but they may not fit you and suit exactly how you've been created. Now your experiences have generated in you this set of interests and talents. I can understand now why it's so popular. It seems to fit where we are culturally too, and understanding that we're more non-traditional in terms of where careers go after school too.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So I guess I'll ask you to elaborate even some more about what makes TMU kind of uniquely positioned to offer this kind of a degree, because it's new for us. I mean, we really would fit under sort of traditional, these are our, 13, 15, 17 major areas of study. This is going to blow that wide open. What makes this place so equipped and ready to do it well?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I think we are uniquely equipped to be able to offer this degree. And I think it comes from our mission. So the idea that Christ is Lord over all, that all things hold together in him. So the motto really for this major comes, in my mind, from Colossians 1, 16, 17, 18, where Paul talks about Christ being in all things and all things hold together in him, which means all things, which means everything, which means that science holds together because of Christ. And history is how it is because of Christ working through the past and through events. So I think this degree really captures who we are as the Masters University, because we're acknowledging that all things hold together in Christ, which means that if you want to study science and you want to study journalism, guess what? They're actually not as distinct as the world thinks they are.
Right.
They're actually related because Christ is over them. Christ is working through them. And so in my mind, this should be the most popular major because it acknowledges what we already know and what we're already promoting and what we're uniquely distinct for is this idea of Christ being Lord over all things holding together in Christ and through Christ. So
I love it. You're already speaking like a director of a program. This program ought to be the most popular. I love it. I hear myself saying the same thing. That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Gamble-Smith, I'm so excited. When does this launch officially?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are working on it through this year. Okay. I'm kind of working with faculty to fine-tune the curriculum.
Okay.
And right now, students actually can declare as interdisciplinary studies major even now. But officially, it will launch next fall.
And it's a Bachelor of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. This has been enlightening and invigorating. I'm really excited to see the type of students who come here to campus to study that and what the Lord's going to do through them and through you and your program.
Thanks. I'm excited. Thanks for your time. This is great.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Discernment. For more information on the Masters University, visit masters.edu. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We'll see you next time.